Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You're all very welcome to the Contemporary Music Centre's CPD series for November 2020. We have the great honour of having Xenia Pestova Bennett with us today. And Xenia is going to tell us all how to relax and to deal with anxiety. And it's a very topical issue at the moment because we have been through layers and layers of COVID restrictions, always seeing light at the end of the tunnel, only for it to be sort of redirected, if you like. Now, in addition to being a fully qualified yoga teacher, Xenia is a very, very well-known concert pianist. She's also a very established composer, and she's a university lecturer. So how she finds time to do all of this is miraculous. Xenia, if I could just have a quick, if you could unmute yourself there and just ask you, how, with obviously a busy performance and music career from the get-go, how you became interested in wellness.
Thank you so much, Linda, and hello everyone, and thank you, Linda, for hosting me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I think it's wonderful that you're doing these series of professional development for the community. Really, really fantastic, so thank you. So as Linda mentioned, I am a musician, I'm a pianist, and my interest in well-being really comes through my own personal struggle to find ways to support myself. And when I was a student 20 odd years ago, it was sort of a taboo topic to discuss, for example, performance anxiety or musicians' injuries or generalized anxiety. So it's only in recent years that we're starting to feel open to talk about this, which is great. But myself and my colleagues just had to kind of struggle in silence to find our own ways. So this is really where my interest came from, through working with performance anxiety, working to support myself and also to support my students. So I went on a journey to try and investigate, find ways, do research. And so what I'm sharing with you today are 3 little techniques that work for me. So I hope you find these helpful too.
Well, I think, Xenia, that it was a widespread, sort of issue that was swept under the carpet throughout professions. I think it was just very much at the fore with performance, because you had to put yourself on stage in front of people, but throughout other areas of life, it was also hidden. And it's wonderful that today people have sessions like this that we can tune into from all over the world. Now, Xenia, are there any things that you would like to pass on to participants that might help them? Because you can't share the same physical space as them, because we're doing this via Zoom unusually. Anything that they might need to know in order to make themselves more comfortable? And
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So in fact, I'm going to share my screen and let's test the little presentation and see if it works. And I have a little introductory starting slide. So of course, we all know to keep ourselves muted for now so that the video doesn't jump when you make a noise unintentionally. You might also want to check that you have me on speaker view. So check the top right-hand corner rather than gallery view, where you see lots of little windows. If you like, it might be helpful to have some tissues handy in case you need to blow your nose, because we are doing a little bit of breath work, and sometimes, as you can imagine, things can start moving. So just if you want to, you can take a moment, grab something to keep on hand. One of the exercises we're doing also involves bringing your hands to your face. So again, just make sure your hands are clean, or you can optionally sit it out and visualize instead. So that's always an option. And lastly, it's really important, as Linda said, because we're not in the same space, you need to make sure you take responsibility to listen to your body. So if for whatever reason something doesn't quite feel right, then please just stop, sit it out, and just do whatever you need to modify it as well. So the exercises we're doing are very accessible and should be no problem. This should be fine for anyone, but especially if you have any pre-existing health conditions, or perhaps if you suffer from panic attacks and anxiety, just be mindful to not do anything that doesn't quite feel right. So that's my little introductory spiel, really. So Linda, I think we can get started with the content. If everybody is here, shall I go on? Yeah, okay, great. So I would like us to start with an experiential exercise before I launch into any sort of theory. And I suppose the last thing to remember is just check that you will not be disturbed. So if it's possible to just check that you're muted and to make sure that you switch off any unnecessary notifications, any devices. So for instance, your phone, if you can put it aside, maybe close email or anything that might beep, make you feel uncomfortable, just so that you have what we call a safe space. And then we can really make sure we enjoy this time that we've carved out for ourselves to really relax. Okay, so we'll start with a practical exercise. And what I'd like us to do is a version of a very ancient yoga exercise. So if you have a yoga practice already, this might be familiar, but it's a slightly modified version. And the exercise is called channel clearing, or you may have heard of it referred to as the alternate nostril breath. So in Sanskrit, this is called nadi shodhana. And I will tell you the fancy Sanskrit names as well, just in case you're interested. So nadi shodhana, channel clearing. We're going to breathe, take in turns through each nostril. So if you have a blocked or runny nose, or if it feels uncomfortable, then please just feel free not to cover the nostrils completely. That is absolutely fine. You can also cover them very lightly, or you can even just lightly touch one nostril and not cover it at all. Or finally, if it's not available, it doesn't feel good, don't cover them at all and just imagine, focus on visualizing as I guide you through the exercise. And we know, of course, that visualization is really important for elite athletes and musicians. We call this cognitive rehearsal. And we know that even just imagining ourselves doing something has the same impact in terms of activating the same neural pathways in the brain as actually doing the activity physically. So not so far-fetched as it might sound to just visualize doing some sort of exercise if you're unable to do it physically. So what we'll do is we will cover our right nostril to start with and breathe through the left, inhaling and exhaling 5 times. Then we'll do 5 rounds on the right, and then we'll breathe through both sides. So what I'm going to do is I will mirror you. So because my image should be flipped. So I'm going to start with my left hand, which is going to be your right. Okay? So covering very lightly or fully, depending on how you feel, the right nostril. Sitting up nice and comfortable, nice and tall, long back, and also checking that our feet are flat on the ground. We're going to take a calm, slow breath through the left. And then exhale also through the left. So we just stick with one side. We're not going to swap around as in some versions of this exercise. And we keep going, we repeat. And let's do this for about 5 or so slow breaths. And don't feel like you need to gulp in loads of air. In fact, we're taking in just about the normal amount of air we would, but we're simply slowing it down. We'll talk about why we do this in a moment. And whenever we're done with our 5 breaths in our own time, we can just swap sides, gently cover the left and breathe through the right. And you might notice that this feels a little bit different. And this is quite interesting. We have something called nostril dominance. And this is when one side is wider than the other. And apparently this switches every few hours. So allegedly through doing this exercise, we're also kind of encouraging a balancing of that. So we're doing about 5 breaths on the right side now. And whenever you're done in your own time, slowly just release that hand and let's breathe through both sides now, nice and slow. Calm breath, again, not gulping in loads of air, just taking our time. Checking that the spine is still long, shoulders are releasing, jaw is soft. And after you've done about 5 breaths, you can just allow your breathing to return to a natural rhythm, so no longer perhaps elongating the inhale and exhale. And just take a moment to notice how you feel now. So just checking in with the body. So maybe something is different or maybe not. Maybe it's the same or maybe it's a very subtle change. But it's just good to check in. How do we feel? Are there any physiological changes after doing that little bit of breath work? And it's quite nice to do this exercise for a little bit longer also in your own time. So for example, maybe 10 breaths on each side or maybe 15. Really taking time to feel what happens then and investigating. Very interesting. So I'm going to share another picture with you now. I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully this works. And you can see a little picture here. So we have a very kind of basic, simplified diagram of our respiratory system. And we can also see our diaphragm there. So just to get an idea, or let's say revise what is happening, it's very, very useful. So we have air entering the body through the nose, hopefully, and I'll talk about the importance of nasal breathing in just a moment, or through the mouth, of course, when we need to. And then flowing down the windpipe, the trachea, dividing into 2 branches, the bronchi, and going into the lungs, and within the lungs dividing into further into many, many smaller branches, the bronchioles, and then finally going into small, tiny little air sacs called the alveoli. And so this is where the gas exchange happens, and our blood vessels, little blood vessels, take oxygen from the alveoli and then also release waste gases that are then expelled again through the windpipe out through the nose. And then you can see the diaphragm, of course, this is a very important kind of sheet, dome-shaped sheet of muscle that separates our chest cavity, our thoracic cavity, from our abdominal cavity, sitting at the base of the rib cage. So a nice analogy that I will show you now, I'll show you another little simplified diagram. This is from yoga educator and breath coach Leslie Kaminov. A very nice analogy is to think of an air balloon sitting on a water balloon. So our lungs are like an air balloon. When we inhale, they expand in all directions, sideways, forwards, backwards, and also down. And then our diaphragm moves, and the belly, which is the water balloon, if you like, moves out of the way. So the belly moves as well when we inhale in a healthy breath. When we exhale, the belly moves back, and then the diaphragm rises, and the lungs exhale and air comes out. So something that's quite nice in terms of thinking about breathing is sometimes when we're anxious, it might feel like it's sort of a struggle to take a breath in. We feel breathless and feel it's really hard to breathe in. So it almost feels like we have to suck in the air. But in fact, if we relax and if we exhale fully, we're creating a sort of a vacuum in the lungs, and then the in-breath can happen naturally because it's the atmospheric pressure of our planet that actually makes us breathe. So it's not like we really need to make a huge effort. We have to make a bit of an effort to engage the belly and exhale. But then when we inhale, it can happen naturally if we just think this is the atmospheric pressure of the planet. So stress, of course, is intimately linked with the breath. And when we experience fight or flight, which is our sympathetic nervous system activation, several things happen, many things happen, in fact, but one of the things is that our breath rate rises, right? So the heart rate goes up, breathing also speeds up, our blood pressure goes up, and our blood sugar rises as well. So this is the sympathetic response. It's really meant for emergencies, and it's meant short-term, as we know, intermittent, and it's supposed to be followed by return to homeostasis for the whole system. So if we activate the sympathetic response quite frequently and maybe don't learn to kind of activate the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, the rest and digest or the relaxation response, then this can lead to long-term health problems. And there is a lot of research documenting that we can have some very serious issues, including susceptibility to multiple diseases and suppressed immune function. So you may have had the advice to take a deep breath when you get anxious or stressed. And I would like to tell you not to do that. So this can be actually not very helpful, because increased breath rate and emphasis on the inhale and rapid shallow chest breathing is in fact associated with the sympathetic nervous system response. So the fight or flight. So sometimes, without meaning to, when we are stressed and we want to take a deep breath, we actually do the opposite. We activate the sympathetic response. So rather, it's more helpful to think about slowing down the breath and perhaps focusing on the exhale to activate the parasympathetic response. We'll do an exercise at the end of the session which emphasizes the exhale and is really, really useful for this. So slow, conscious breathing, really, really helpful, as I mentioned. And what happens is it balances the nervous system, it lowers your heart rate, elongates the breath, obviously. And so rest and digest, or tend and befriend, the parasympathetic response can kick in. So this can help us override the habit of stress. It can help us strengthen immunity, and is also really, really helpful for producing a very interesting signaling molecule in the nasal cavities. And I'll tell you about that as well. This is really, really fun. So breathing through the nose, I mentioned briefly how it's really, really important to balance the autonomic nervous system. And this is because mouth breathing is also directly associated with fight or flight, with the sympathetic response. So you may be familiar with that sensation of getting a fright or jumping into cold water, and the first reaction of the body is to take a big breath in through the mouth, right? So this is really a kind of hardwired response. So as much as possible as we go through our daily lives, it's really important to try and breathe through the nose to counteract that. And nasal breathing is in turn linked with abdominal breathing rather than chest breathing. So this is what allows us to use the diaphragm, allows the belly to puff out. When I say abdominal breathing, as we saw on the diagram, we know there aren't any lungs in the abdomen, but we need to be able to relax the belly and allow it to move so that the air balloon can expand. So when we breathe through the nose, this is really helpful for abdominal breathing. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system response, and it also warms, humidifies, and sterilizes the air before drawing it into our lungs. So I would like us to do a nasal breathing exercise. And I will show you first just another couple of diagrams. So through this exercise, one of the theories is that we are also massaging our vagus nerve. So you may have heard of the vagus nerve. Here's a kind of a simplified image. This is a very important nerve that kind of connects basically our brain and our gut. So the sympathetic and parasympathetic responses also kind of use that nerve to communicate. And it passes through every major organ. and also passes through the diaphragm. So one of the theories is that breath work kind of massages and stretches the vagus nerve. Here's a picture that shows the vagus nerve maybe a little bit better. It's quite sort of impressive looking. It's really, really wide reaching and long, really interesting. So I would like us to have a go at massaging our vagus nerve. And what we will do is breathe through the nose, as I mentioned, and also activate a sort of an imaginary valve at the back of our throat that allows us to control airflow. So we're going to slow down the rate of air that comes in and out. This is another yoga exercise, and it also has a fancy Sanskrit name, Ujjayi Pranayama, Ujjayi Samavriti Pranayama. So Ujjayi translates roughly something like the victorious stretching of the breath, very lofty name. But I like another term that you may have heard used, which is ocean breath. And that's because the sound that we produce, a very, very subtle sound when we activate that imaginary valve at the back of our throat, is kind of like a distant sound of the surf, of the ocean surf. So that's quite a nice analogy, I find. So this is an excellent practice for calming down. It narrows the passage of air that we breathe and filters and warms it. It helps us oxygenate the blood, enriches the blood, it strengthens the lungs and the diaphragm, and also increases lung capacity, allegedly, which is interesting. So as a result, we can feel calmer, more focused, more present, more gathered, and less stressed. So there are a few ways of teaching this exercise, and I'm going to use my favorite way, which is when we pretend that we're fogging up a mirror or a pair of glasses before we give them a wipe. So say if I have my specs and maybe they're a little bit hazy, I want to give them a bit of a clean, I'm going to do this. And maybe give them a wipe. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to make that kind of a sound as we exhale. And to start with, we will do this with our mouth open. So we'll breathe out through the mouth. So we'll breathe in through the nose. And then as we breathe out through the mouth, we're going to imagine we're fogging up our mirror or glasses. So let's try that together. So remembering again, we're not gulping in loads of air. We're just breathing normally. So just taking a normal, calm breath through the nose, full breath. And as you exhale, imagine you're fogging up your mirror or glasses. Just as long as the breath lasts. And again, inhaling through the nose. Can be very subtle, doesn't have to be forceful. Exhaling through the mouth. Making that hissy ocean sound. And let's do it again. And this time we'll close the mouth halfway, but keep the hiss going. So inhaling. And let's repeat. So you're probably thinking you're starting to sound a bit like Darth Vader. That's okay. Inhaling through the nose. Exhaling, starting with the mouth open and closing halfway. And let's see if we can keep that going now with the mouth closed. So we inhale normally, nice and slow, and exhale, do our little hiss with the mouth closed. Keeping that going in your own time. And the trick here is to see if we can slow down the breath. So maybe if it's comfortable enough for you, think about aiming for about 4 or 5 seconds for every inhale and the same for every exhale. So we're making the inhale and the exhale approximately the same length, and we're making a little hiss on the exhale, filtering the air. Taking our time, in our own time. And if that feels okay, keep this going for a little while in your own time. If that feels okay, you can either keep it going or stop at any time that you need to, by the way, if you want to. But either keep it going a bit longer or if you would like to experiment a little bit further, you can imagine you're activating that valve in the throat on the inhale as well. So this will be a bit different, a different feeling. If it doesn't feel good, don't worry, don't do it. So it can be a little bit more subtle. It's easier to do this on the exhale. That's normal. But if you feel okay, try it and just see how it feels. So you're filtering and warming the air. You can imagine that you're also filtering out any microbes, any viruses, really activating that valve, controlling airflow. And we'll keep this going for a few more rounds. Let's do 2 more breaths like that, slowing down. And whenever you're ready, you can again just allow the breath to come back to a natural rhythm and release the valve at the back of your throat. So don't control the airflow anymore, just allow it to come to whatever it wants to be. And take a moment to check in and notice how you feel now. So breathing at this particular rate of about 5 seconds for every inhale and 5 seconds for every exhale is also known as coherent breathing. And this rate of breath is very, very beneficial for balancing the nervous system. And there are a lot of recent studies, even though it's a very, very old exercise, but there is some interesting research that really looks into this. And I can share some resources at the end of the session if anybody wants to follow up further. So the next step with this kind of exercise would be to see if we can utilize this ocean breath when the heart rate is slightly elevated. So not just when we're sitting down, we relax, but perhaps if we go for a walk. So some sort of very gentle exercise, not obviously when we're running or anything like that, but if we're moving, if we're walking, perhaps seeing if we can keep the breath slow, even if the heart rate is slightly elevated. And this is really excellent training for when we do find ourselves in a challenging or difficult situation. And of course, what happens is with fight or flight, as we know, the breath rate rises, the heart rate rises. So we can actually learn to calm the system down through the breath this way, filtering and warming the air. So you're kind of sending a message that everything is okay. And then you might find the heart rate can slow down a little bit too. So really good training for resilience. So I already mentioned the importance of nasal breathing and filtering the air. But as I said to you, there's another interesting benefit there to overall health and also the immune response. And of course, this is something I'm sure we're all very interested in right now. So this is the production of nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is a very important signaling molecule. And what happens is nitric oxide is produced in the nasal cavity and in our blood vessels. So it actually dilates the lungs, it dilates blood vessels. It also regulates the opening and closing of blood vessels, and so assists in respiration. It prevents high blood pressure, also assists in neurotransmission and our immune defense. So apparently nitric oxide acts as a defense against microorganisms, against microbes, viruses entering our bloodstream. So antiviral and antimicrobial. And as I said, it's produced inside the nasal cavity and then transferred to our lungs as we breathe in. So really important to engage in this nasal breathing to produce nitric oxide. So there is also some very interesting research that shows that production of nitric oxide is enhanced when we hum. And there is a very interesting yoga breathing exercise that utilizes that. And so there were studies that actually looked at what happens in the nasal cavity when we do this exercise, and apparently it really, really enhances the production of nitric oxide. So I would like us to do this exercise together and see how you find it. So this exercise really, really emphasizes the exhale. So rather than making the inhale and exhale the same length as we've been doing, we're going to be elongating the exhale. And this is really, really important for our parasympathetic response. So when we really need to calm down, this is an excellent thing to do. And you might find it's also helpful for relaxing in the evening. For instance, I actually do it almost every evening before I go to bed. And if you're having trouble sleeping, it's really, really worth giving it a go. Really beneficial. So in fact, after this session, you might find that you feel kind of a bit tired and you want to yawn, and that's absolutely fine. That's normal. So that's a sign that your whole system is just sort of calming down. And it could also be a sign that you are tired and you need to cut yourself a break and take a little rest. So what we're going to do is we're going to, again, inhale normally, but then as we exhale, we do everything through the nose. We keep the mouth closed completely for this one. But as we exhale, we're going to just hum a comfortable low frequency, something that just resonates low in the throat. We're not singing, and you're all muted, so it's absolutely fine. Nobody's going to hear anyone. Very safe. And we're just going to keep that hum going until the end of the breath. So it's a very good way to control and lengthen the exhale. So as long as we have air, we just keep going without gasping or killing ourselves. And then we stop when it feels right, when it sort of runs out. And then we repeat. We take a slow inhale through the nose. We exhale and hum. And again, remember, you don't have to breathe in a lot of air. If you overbreathe, it might make you feel lightheaded. So just being mindful that we breathe light, we breathe slow. We kind of, again, just slow the rate of the inhale rather than try to gulp loads in. So we don't have to kind of make the exhale super, super long by having loads of air. Not at all. It's really rather about being relaxed and letting it happen naturally. So this exercise is called the humming bee breath, or Brahmari in Sanskrit. And apparently I'm told that in Sanskrit, Brahmar actually means wasp rather than bee. And of course, very different insects, but nonetheless, for some reason, the English translation that stuck is the bee breath. It does sound remarkably like a bee, and especially if you do it in a room with other people, it sounds like a beehive. It's really, really interesting. So we're not going to do that today. We're going to do it on our own. But let's see how it feels and how it sounds for you. So we can place our hands softly in our lap for this and just relax the body, release any unnecessary tension. Place the feet flat on the floor. So if you have your legs crossed, just check that you uncross them. And there is an option to do this exercise while blocking our ears. So you might want to experiment if that feels comfortable, because then you get to hear all the resonances inside the skull as well. But it's also absolutely fine to relax the hands and not do that. So if you're wearing headphones, for example, might not be comfortable. Okay, so let's have a go. We'll do about 10 breaths in our own time, and I will start. So you will unfortunately be subjected to my humming. So just do your own thing, and please don't try and coordinate with me in any way. Okay, so we just inhale calmly and exhale as long as the breath lasts. And repeat. 2 more breaths in your own time. And whenever you're ready, you can just allow the breath again to return to a natural rhythm, taking a moment to blink your eyes open if they were closed. Just come back to the space around you and just notice how you feel. Check in. So take a moment without any hurry. How you feel. You might feel a little bit spacey. That's okay. Just acknowledge that. Just see what's going on physiologically. So what I would invite you to do is to try these exercises in your own time and perhaps consider developing a regular breathing practice. And breath work is really effective if we do it on a regular basis. So I wouldn't leave it, for example, until we are in a difficult or challenging situation, because then we can also start associating certain things with these kinds of situations. So it's better to be really familiar with it, do it regularly, and then you'll be able to access it when you need it most as well. So what I'm going to do is I will send Linda a little list of kind of a summary of our session and video links to the exercises. So if you want to, you can always have a look and revise them in your own time. And I'm going to share my screen with you one last time. So if you are interested in further resources, there are a few books that I can recommend. And I can also, in fact, share the slides with Linda, and she can just email them to you so you can have a look and explore these things in your own time. And if you are interested in this kind of work, you're also very welcome to join the couple of sessions that I have coming up. I have a couple of breathwork sessions remaining on Thursday lunchtimes, and I'm also doing a workshop online on the 22nd of November, which will look at breathwork combined with yoga. So breathwork and movement to work on anxiety management. So what I will do now is I will actually paste those links into the chat. So if you are interested, you can just click on these and then have a look in your own time. And just make sure you do it before we close the meeting, because I think otherwise it will disappear. So I think at this point we can go into a little bit of discussion, and it would be really lovely to hear from you about your experience and how you found the exercises, and also if you have any questions or if you have any tips and tricks to share about your anxiety management techniques. So Linda, perhaps would you like to take over at this point?
Xenia, thank you very much. I found that very relaxing myself, and the truth of the matter is it couldn't be coming at a better time, because this is funding application frenzy time in the arts. And you know, at the moment there's an awful lot of deadlines going on, and I would be the biggest sinner in terms of breathing regularly or anything like that. So I did find it very relaxing myself. Just so you know, I will circulate to everybody who has registered for this session those links that Xenia sent in. So don't stress about trying to grab them now before the session ends. It gives me great pleasure to thank you, Xenia. You're such a consummate musician in every aspect of that word. And it's always lovely to hear something from somebody who I suppose is so well respected in her field, and that, you know, it makes people like me, let's say, feel okay about maybe not always handling every situation as well as you think you could, and not to necessarily hold yourself up to a test that's not provable. So I will thank Xenia very much. Tell you all, if you don't know already, that there's 2 more sessions in this series. for any composers or performers among you who may want to know more about Sibelius and be introduced to Dorico. We're going to have a session the same time next week on the 19th of November, again free to participate in. And on the 26th, Rob Farhat is going to talk to us about developing audiences, and he's an expert in that area. So it's a round robin of CPD issues. It's not one theme. It's just sort of, I suppose, we ask our composers what areas that concern them. And Xenia's area was no big surprise that anxiety management came up now. But actually, even outside of COVID, performers have always, it's an ongoing theme. It's just become more kind of commonplace now to worry about it. But Xenia, as always, it was a total pleasure to have you address us. And I'm sure everybody would be happy to. Yeah. Very, very nice. And if we see you guys on any of these Thursdays in November at 4 o'clock, that would be wonderful. Otherwise, thank you for joining in.